There was a question during office hours on Tuesday about Renin-Angiotensin Mechanism, and I just want to make sure everybody really understands what it is, what triggers it, and what it actually accomplishes in your body, because that's one of the key controls of your blood pressure. And I want to make sure, like, I would feel like I haven't done my job if you know, move on from this class without having a basic sense of like, oh yeah, I know renin-angiotensin mechanism. Like, what would trigger the release of renin by the kidneys?
Your blood pressure dropping.
Exactly. So if blood pressure is dropping, the kidneys are going to notice it and they're going to respond by releasing renin, which ultimately is going to work to bring your blood pressure back up. Right? So that the whole point of this is it, and we're going to see later on why the kidneys care so much. Basically, the kidneys won't have their filtration happening unless there's adequate blood pressure. So they're very, very cognizant of what is the blood pressure and if it's dropping to make sure it stays high enough. So renin is released, and then it starts a whole cascade of events. What happens once renin is released?
It catalyzes angiotensinogen.
Yeah, exactly. So we have angiotensinogen becomes angiotensin 1. And then what happens to that angiotensin 1?
ACE catalyzes it into angiotensin 2.
Exactly. So AC, angiotensin converting enzyme, ACE, converts it into the active thing, which is angiotensin 2. And like I mentioned, ACE is one of the targets of really common hypertension drugs. By inhibiting ACE, the ACE inhibitors, you are going to stop everything else that's about to be described, right? So if you stop ACE, everything we're about to say isn't going to happen. And these are all things that are in service of bringing up your blood pressure. So by stopping ACE, you're going to stop all these things that bring up your blood pressure. What does angiotensin 2 do that help increase your blood pressure?
It's a vasoconstrictor.
So that's one thing. Indeed, it's short term. It's going to cause vasoconstriction, which we know increases blood pressure. And
it causes a release of ADH.
It causes a release of ADH. And that's from the pituitary. We'll talk about that more. But what does ADH do that we've mentioned specifically?
Retain water.
So it retains water. It tells the kidneys to keep water in your body. And again, volume is, we said, the main long-term control of blood pressure. By keeping the volume up, you are going to keep the blood pressure up. Right? So angiotensin 2, vasoconstriction, that's like short-term. ADH, keeping the volume up, that's more of a long-term thing, but they both are keeping the blood pressure up. What else does ADH do?
Triggers thirst.
Triggers thirst, which is also another thing to keep the volume up. The more you drink, the more volume you've got in your water in your body. So both telling the kidneys to conserve water, telling the hypothalamus to drink, keeping your volume up, that's going to keep your pressure up. And ADH has one other thing that it does.
Does it? I don't know if I'm right, but does it release aldosterone?
So that's going to be another hormone that is triggered by angiotensin 2. Aldosterone will be important, but in a few moments.
Okay.
So ADH has one other role, and that is it itself is a vasoconstrictor. So ADH, in addition to helping doing the long-term stuff, keeping the volume up, also does the short-term stuff of causing vasoconstriction to keep the blood pressure up. Right? And then the other thing is the aldosterone, which is released in response to angiotensin 2. And aldosterone talks to the kidneys to conserve sodiums. And again, the more salt you keep in your body, the more water you keep in your body. It's just kind of basic osmosis. So by increasing reclamation of salt into the body, you increase pulling water back into your body and keeping your blood volume up. And keeping your blood volume up, you keep your blood pressure up. So yeah, just because I just wanted to make sure, like that, I was talking to somebody earlier, there seemed to be some confusion over exactly what was going on. And again, this is important to make sure you understand. Any
So
other?
just
Yeah.
so just to make sure, so the ACE inhibitors basically stop angiotensin 2 from happening.
Exactly.
And then what about the beta blockers and the diuretics? Does the diuretic just stop ADH from happening or being released?
No, they work a different place. We're going to talk about the nephrons in more detail. A lot of the common diuretics are called loop diuretics. They work by blocking these sodium pumps in the loops of Henle, and you have less of a osmotic gradient to pull water back into the body. But that's the mechanism for the diuretics is something we won't get to until we look at the kidneys. The effect on blood pressure, though, is lowering blood volume lowers blood pressure. So peeing out more by whatever mechanism is going to keep your blood pressure down. In the beta blockers, how do beta blockers help keep your blood pressure from rising? What is a beta blocker?
An adrenergic antagonist.
Yeah, exactly. Adrenergic antagonist. So they're blocking adrenaline receptors, basically. And why is that good if you don't want your blood pressure to go up?
Keeps your contractility low, so it lowers your stroke volume.
Yeah, so one thing is it keeps the contractile strength of the heart muscle lower, means it doesn't squeeze as hard. Your end systolic volume is higher. There's more blood left even after you finish squeezing. So less stroke volume means less cardiac output, right? And cardiac output, remember, if we go, maybe I should, just so you all, so there's this idea of volume, which is more on the side. Blood volume is going to be essential to think about blood pressure. But then everything else kind of all goes into that equation. Blood pressure, and in particular, let's talk about mean arterial pressure, is going to be cardiac output, which is basically our flow, times the resistance. Right? So if I'm looking at my overall blood pressure in my body, resistance goes up from vasoconstriction, my blood pressure goes up. Resistance goes down because of vasodilation, the blood pressure goes down. So that one's very straightforward. And then the flow, cardiac output, we talked about was stroke volume times heart rate. So beta blockers are going to keep stroke volume down by making the cardiac muscle not contract as strongly. If this is lower, then this is lower, which means this is lower. What else does a thing that blocks adrenaline going to do here to cardiac output? What's another effect of the sympathetic nervous system on the heart?
Slows the rate.
Yeah, so normally sympathetic nervous system speeds up the heart, right? So if we block the adrenergic receptors, we block the adrenaline receptors, we're going to keep the heart rate down. And again, if heart rate stays down, that keeps the flow down, keeps the pressure down. Right? So you definitely want to kind of remember this basic relationship when you are trying to kind of make sense of all this stuff. Right? You know, and again, the other way, if you spin it around, you can say flow is, blood pressure over resistance. So sometimes this is a useful way to think about it. But when you're thinking about just control of systemic blood pressure, this is the main equation you think about. So are there other questions, things about, we covered a lot. We spent a lot of time in the cardiovascular system, and then so we have muscles, cardiovascular system, and then whirlwind tour of the respiratory system. Anything else anybody would like me to kind of go over? Or, I can also just call it a day, and then I'll be here for office hours for anybody who has specific questions about anything. All right, so if there are no more kind of group questions, then I will bid thee all adieu. You do have the exam on Tuesday, which will cover this stuff. I will do my best to answer any questions that you have. Email me. Again, I'm in office hours right now. There is a lot, but it's like slow and steady. That's why I like, the warm-ups and everything. You kind of keep up and keep studying. So each new thing is just a new thing to add to the growing body of knowledge that you already have. And we'll meet at 8:10 on Tuesday morning and kind of check in for any last minute questions. And at that point, we will dive into exam 3.